Services Division with the Department of Human Services, and one of the 1915I administrators. And I also see we are joined by Melissa Clocky Joyce, another program administrator from Medical Services, and Monica Haugen and Jennifer Aus from the Behavioral Health Division, also 1959 program administrators. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to, well, first to start off, CMS doesn't just give states all this Medicaid funding. They hold us very accountable for the money. So they require us to do an annual report, and they tell us what we have to measure, what exactly we have to report on. So the 1915I being a new program, we are still in the process of developing the quality assurance process. We've made a lot of progress, and visiting with you today about your role is the next step in our process. So I am going, after I'm done giving you a broad overview and explain your role, then Melissa Clocky Joyce is going to introduce some forms and get more specific about what your role is. So I am going to share my screen. Can someone let me know if you can see my screen? Okay. And first of all, do not be nervous about this process. Do not be alarmed. Like I said, we are in this together. The state has requirements we have to meet. We're going to go through this together. It's going to be a very fluid process. Once Melissa introduces the forms to you, we are going to be open to all kinds of feedback, because you can imagine what it's like to be an administrator with the state office and trying to imagine how you guys within your individualized agencies are going to produce what we ask. So keep that in mind as we go through this process, and we'll talk more at the end about it. So here is our broad overview of our quality improvement process for the 1915I. CMS tells us when these reports are due. So year one, which we just finished, began October 1, 2020, and it went through September 30th of 21. Well, we have to have our first annual report to CMS by March 31st of 23. So what we have to do prior to that March 31st is we have to collect all the data. Then we have to determine if we're in compliance or not. If we're not in compliance, then we have to do a program improvement plan and be in compliance by that March date when we submit. So here's what our whole process looks like. Here you see CMS Annual 1915I report. Here we have the Behavioral Health Division is reviewing our random sample of plan of cares that CMS requires us to review. We can do that through our MMIS system, so you won't even know that's going on unless we would have to reach out for you for some reason. Same as this next area, which is the 1915I paid claims review. We have to assure to CMS that every claim that we paid to 1915I providers was previously approved through the service auth. So, and we have to prove that we paid you at the rate that CMS approved us to pay you at. So all different things regarding claims. So that is another area that's going on behind the scenes that you won't even be aware of. However, then we get to this the third column here, which says 1915I provider reviews. So here we go. If we go over here to provider enrollment qualifications, all of you are aware when you enrolled, there were certain requirements that you had to meet to even become a 1915I provider. So Melissa has already went through every single provider and made certain that our provider enrollment captured everything that they needed to do. Can you guys hear me? I just got a little pop-up that said, please call back in. So, okay, good. So Melissa already worked directly with our provider enrollment department, which includes Noridian, and made sure basically that they are doing what CMS requires of this program. And if there were any areas that weren't being captured appropriately, then she worked with provider enrollment to fix that. So it was, this being our first year, it was quite a learning experience for us and for our provider enrollment department. Moving forward, it should be a lot better and easier. So then we go over here, and here's really where you guys all fall in. So there's much more that we promised CMS in that application that we would, providers would do as far as training and other requirements that we don't capture when you enroll, because that would take you forever. You would not be able to have accomplished everything at the time of enrollment. So that's where this process comes in, and this is where we are today. So there's actually two parts of that, and we're not going to focus on this part. We've already visited with care coordination providers about the plan of care self-reviews. So that's half of this column that impacts providers. But today we're going to focus right here. So this impacts all providers, not just care coordination, but all providers. And for simplicity purposes, I'm calling it the requirement self-review. So notice a self-review. So this is the part that Melissa is going to get into with you today. And we're going to tell you what we need to prove to CMS. And then you guys are going to tell us how you, or show us how you meet that requirement. And none of you are going to be in compliance right now. So if you are, I would be very shocked, and you would just be absolute genius rock stars, because I just don't see there's any way that you could have your policies in place and have all these forms. So that's what I meant by don't be alarmed. Everybody should be out of compliance at this point. So once we look at those reports, then, and you complete them, then you're going to submit them. So all of this is happening up here. And then this is where we get into, okay, are we compliant? CMS requires us to be 85% compliant. If we're not, then we need to develop a program improvement plan and start improving up to 85%, or wouldn't it be nice if we were 100%? So how is that going to happen? We are going to start quarterly, I called them quality improvement strategy meetings. And during these meetings, we're going to take a look at where we're at. And then we are going to develop and implement a quality improvement plan. So we're going to meet quarterly. Right now, this is brand new, so we are going to pull together behavioral health, medical services, and Blue Cross Blue Shield, because they are the MCO, our managed care organization. So they need to report data too. So that is where we're going to start with. We're going to do quarterly meetings. Eventually, we want to pull in recipients of our services, some of the individuals that we serve. So that will be coming. We also want to pull in providers to be a part of this. We don't know what that's going to look like yet. Will it turn out to be like an advisory committee, or we don't know what that's going to look like. So I wanted to put it on here so you guys know you will be included in this process somehow, because we learn from you. You learn from us, we learn from you. So, and same with the individuals we serve. We need their feedback too. So we're going to be meeting quarterly, and then once we are able to get that annual report done, we submit it, and then the process starts all over again. So are there any questions to this point? Hopefully the broad picture overview was helpful for you, rather than just introducing the forms and you not knowing why we do things. I know I'm one who always likes to know, why do I have to do this or get to do this? So if there's no questions right now, I'm going to turn it over to Melissa to introduce you to the group and individual provider review forms. Thank you.
Can someone let me know if they can see the provider agency report on the screen?
We can see it. Good, Melissa.
Great, okay. So I'm Melissa, and I work with Dawn and Monica and Jennifer with the 1959 team. And so as Dawn mentioned, I put together these there's two different reports, one for the agency or group provider, and then one for the individual providers. And I attached these reports to the meeting invites, and I'm hoping everyone got a chance to kind of glance over them and kind of get a feel for what we're asking from you. I thought it'd be easiest to start with the provider agency or group review report, and just kind of go over the layout and the instructions. I'm not going to go through every requirement line by line. You're all capable of reading those on your own. And then if there's any questions, I'll be happy to try to answer them at the end here. As I mentioned, I'll just kind of run through the layout of the report so you kind of know what we're asking for. And please don't get too upset with us. These are requirements of CMS or requirements that you attested to when you enrolled with provider enrollment. So this isn't stuff that Don or I, made up for you to make your lives more difficult. It's for our federal reporting purposes, and we just something that we have to do with the program. So just rest assured we didn't stay up all night trying to make your lives harder or more difficult. So anyway, I'll get started with this will be the group or the agency report. So every provider is going to have to fill out this report. If you were enrolled with us during the reporting period that Dawn had laid out before in the workflow, but this first section here is pretty self-explanatory. So you'll just fill out who the report is being completed by, just the individual's name, the date you're completing this report, the name of your provider agency, and the reporting period. And every year it's going to be October 1st, through September 30th. And that's just so we can align with CMS's reporting dates, because as Don showed earlier, every year this is what the dates our program falls into, and then we have a report to send to CMS. So this reporting period will be October 1st of 2020 through September 30th of 2021. So any providers that were enrolled to provide 1959 services during this reporting period will need to complete this report. If you enrolled after September 30th, then you'll fall in next year's annual reporting. So this is a form that we're going to want every year, but I'll get down to that in the instructions. So the purpose of this report contains all requirements for 1959 provider agencies outlined in the 1959 State Plan Amendment, and as you attested to in the 1959 provider enrollment process. This report is used for required CMS reporting and as an internal review by the Department of Human Services to ensure compliance with 1959 regulations. And I'll move down to the instructions here. Number 1, the provider agency shall report on the October 1st to September 30th reporting period. Number 2, the provider agency shall attach to this report applicable policy and or supporting documentation relevant to each requirement. So every requirement that I'll show you down here, kind of at the bottom of the form here, we're asking for documentation from your agency to prove that you meet each and every one of these requirements. And as Don stated, you know, a lot of you probably don't have your policy written yet, and we understand that. So we don't want anyone to be alarmed. This is all a work in progress, and we're hoping this is where we want to get to in the future. And you can prove all of these, that your agency meets all of these requirements. Number 3, the provider agency shall submit this report annually, along with policy and our supporting documentation to the state Medicaid agency's 1959 administrator at the email provided. And usually every year we're going to request this by January 1st. Obviously this year we're past that. So we're requesting this year that you submit your report and documentation by April 29th of 2022. And again, we know that a lot or all of you will probably be in non-compliance, but this is just a good starting point to see what the requirements are in the state plan amendment and the requirements that you attested to when enrolling as a provider. So I'm just going to run through kind of an example here. So our first requirement, you'll simply just mark yes or no if you can provide documentation on this. So requirement 1, agency provided documentation of internal policy that requirements of individual providers of services meet required qualifications initially and ongoing. Policy should state if agency keeps a copy of degree or exception approved by DHS in the individual provider's file. So we're just simply asking the agency to provide us documentation that their individual providers are meeting requirements and qualifications, and that is up to you what kind of documentation you want to submit to us. And if you're able to do so, you'll just simply select yes and attach that documentation to this report. If there's nothing you can provide to us at this point to meet this requirement, you'll mark no. And under every requirement, we have a little box for you to kind of explain. If you answered no, what is the provider agency's plan of action to address the non-compliance? So we simply just want to know, if you can't meet this requirement, how is your agency going to take steps to come into compliance with this requirement, and what that time frame may look like? You know, is it something you can do in a month, in 2 months, maybe 6? Kind of depends on what we're asking. So it's all laid out pretty much the same all the way through the document. Every requirement will have a yes or no checkbox. And if you have that documentation, again, just submit it and select yes next to that requirement that you can prove that you meet that and you're in compliance. And I'll just kind of scroll to the bottom here. I wanted to go through requirements 9, 10, and 11. They're actually provider specific, or not, excuse me, they're service specific. So as you can see under requirement 9, only complete if agency is enrolled in care coordination and or housing support services. So you're only going to complete this section if you're enrolled to provide care coordination or housing supports as an agency. And if you're not, just simply select NA and you can skip it. Number 10, requirement 10 is the same. Only complete this section if you're enrolled for non-medical transportation service. So if you are enrolled, you'll need to meet this requirement, kind of select yes or no. And if you're not enrolled to provide this service, you'll just select NA. And requirement 11, this was applicable to 3 different services. So only complete this section if you are enrolled in pre-vocational training, supported education, and or supported employment. And again, if that doesn't apply to you, just select NA. And then there's a little section at the bottom of the form or the report for the provider agency to simply sign and date. And you can add any comments that you would like to submit to the department for us to review, or anything you want us to know. Just you can put in that section there, and then the department, we're going to decide if your agency is in compliance or not at this point with the documentation that you submitted with this report, and we'll add any comments, and we're going to sign and date as well at the bottom. And if we have comments or anything we'd like feedback to give back to you, we're gonna send that report and commentary back to the provider agency. So that's really a broad overview of the agency report. Does anybody have any questions on it?
Melissa,
Yes.
I have a question. For number 9, can you go back to that one? I know
Yes.
we've had a lot of conversation internally and with some providers, but probably not everybody, about this one in particular. And we did make some changes to our policy or some clarifications to our policy. So I just wanted to see if maybe, Donna's still on. Maybe we could kind of talk through those changes as far as that 24/7 availability and what that, what the expectation is for that.
Do you want me to talk about that?
Well, I don't know if did the policy get updated and shared yet, or is that still something I can't remember?
I have it in revision state, but I
Okay.
haven't actually issued it yet.
Oh, okay. Okay. So would you
Let me,
want me to pull it up, or do you
no,
want me
I
to
can
share
pull
it?
it up real quick.
Okay. I don't want to put you on the spot, but I know that
No,
it's been a question in the past, so
nope, let me find it real.
perfect. Thank you.
Sorry, Monica, I didn't know if you were talking to me or Dawn.
No,
I
that's
didn't
fine.
either.
I just threw it out there to the universe, hoping that somebody would answer.
Yeah.
I just don't know if I have the most updated version of the draft available to me, so I wanted to make sure we shared the most recent.
All right, where did I put that? Just wait 1 second. All right, I found it. Let me share my screen. All right, here we go. Okay, so this is within the care coordination policy. And we're going to go right down here where that requirement is under the provider qualifications and where it says on your provider enrollment agreement, agency availability 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to clients in need of emergency care coordination services. So here is how this policy is expanded upon to explain that in more detail. Providers will have a policy stating how they will meet this requirement with the goal of keeping the client in their home and community and provide alternatives to prevent inappropriate use of hospital, emergency room, or inpatient psychiatric placement, jail, or institutional placements. Provider agencies will ensure the individuals they serve have access to emergency services 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The provider and individual will develop a risk safety emergency crisis plan during the person-centered plan of care process, ensuring the individual has access to 24/7 emergency services, either directly by the provider or through the use of natural supports and or resources available within their community.
Thank you, Dawn.
Any questions on that? That sounds a lot better, doesn't it? And that really was our intention. We just hadn't expanded on the policy to tell you our intentions. All right, thank you.
Okay, does anyone have any questions? I can pull up the agency report again if anyone would like. If anyone had any questions on it. If not, I can go over the next report.
I have a couple of questions, if I may.
Sure.
Okay, this is Dale Wolf. This is Dale Wolf at Lighthouse Church. And I don't know if you have to pull it up.
Yes.
I just want to make some clarifications, and I'm sorry if I missed it in the whole ordeal, okay? Number one, we were approved as a provider, but did not provide any services prior to that period of time. Do we still fill out a report?
Yes. Yep. Dawn, please correct me if I'm wrong, but yes, you would fill out the report.
Okay. And if we have potentially been approved for a couple of those areas, but have not necessarily even put people in place for them yet, do we need to fill out for those areas, such as the housing or the employment areas?
Let me just clarify your question. So you are enrolled to provide the services, correct? You just haven't actually provided them yet? Is that what you?
Yes, and really don't have a person in place yet. There's a lot of time warp in the whole process that we went through, so.
Okay. Yeah, I believe the report would still need to be completed. Dawn, is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. And you may not be able to provide any evidence, and that's what we expect. So really look at this as a training tool, because this is really what the state is held accountable to, and providers will eventually be held accountable to. So if it says, do you have a policy in place for your individual provider affiliated with you? If you don't, then just say that, but then say, we're going to be working on it. Same as training logs. Like, as a provider, you will be responsible for ensuring that your individual providers affiliated with you get the training that is required in the application by CMS. So if you don't have that done, we don't really expect you to, but it will start you thinking, okay, we don't have this done now, but we're going to get started on it. Does that help?
It does. I think part of what we got into is kind of signing up and registering for areas that seemed to fit, and we were going to see when we got closer. And so we're literally providing one service right now, and are going to see how that goes before we decide what else we would do. Does that make sense?
It does. So
Yep.
your reports are going to reflect that.
All right, very good. Appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Just a question. This is Becky from Prairie Harvest Mental Health. So the reporting period is to September 30th of 2021, but it's due April 29th of 22. If by chance, like the questions of, do we have a policy? If we didn't have one written by September 30th, but by chance we had it done by the middle of April and submitted this, how would you answer that? Would you answer it based on what we did or didn't have in that reporting period?
Again, this is an extremely flexible process. I would just put it on here because you're certainly not going to get in trouble.
Okay.
And if I would say, if you say we didn't have this completed by the end of the reporting period, however, we have it completed now, that is perfect.
Okay, so you'd answer no, but then explain it in the comments that you had it ready.
Yeah.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Anybody else have anything they'd like to ask, or? If not, I'll move on to the next report. So this will be the individual provider review report. And again, it's laid out, this first section is pretty much just like the other report. You'll fill in who it was completed by, the date the report was completed, the name of the individual provider that you're reviewing, and the affiliated agency of that provider. And again, the review period is the same. It's going to be October 1st through September 30th. The same as the other reports. So again, this is going to be an annual report. This will need to be filled out for every individual provider that was enrolled to provide 1915I services during this time frame. Some of the agencies may have one or two individual providers. I know some others may have 20 or more. So if you're an agency who's got 20 or more individual providers enrolled and affiliated with you, it might be a lot of work, but we're looking for this report annually as well. And the purpose is pretty much the same. It contains all requirements of the 1915I individual providers outlined in the 1915I state plan amendment and attested to in the 1915I provider enrollment process. This report is used for required CMS reporting and as an internal review by the Department of Human Services to ensure compliance with 1915I regulations. So again, Dawn and I didn't stay up late at night trying to think of ways to make your job more difficult. This was requirements outlined in the amendment and in the enrollment process. So this is again just a process to get that required documentation to ensure that yes, the individual providers enrolled are meeting the requirements in the plan. So the instructions of the provider agency shall maintain a file on each 1915I individual provider and complete a review for each provider for the review period. Number 2, the provider agency shall report on the October 1st to September 30th review period. So if you enrolled any individual providers after September 30th, you don't need to include them in this review. It's just going to be who was enrolled during that reporting period to provide 1950 services. Number 3, the provider agency shall attach to this report applicable policy and/or supporting documentation relevant to each requirement. And number 4, the agency shall submit this report annually along with policy and/or supporting documentation to the state Medicaid agency's 1959 administrator at the email provided by April 29th. And again, we're looking next year and moving forward to get these reports on by January 1st. This section here, you'll just select the service that the individual provider is enrolled to provide. Each individual provider you're being reviewed may be enrolled in different services. So in this section, we're just looking for you to check that specific service that the individual we're looking at in this report is enrolled to provide. The individual provider requirements, these are broken out per service. So only complete services below the individual provider is enrolled to provide. So you only have to complete the sections that the individual provider is enrolled to, maybe say, do care coordination. So you'll just fill out the care coordination section. Each service is listed in gray and broken out. And again, I'm not going to run through every single service, but you'll see the training and support service here, your peer support, your family peer support, and so on. So it's broken out by service. So again, you're only going to fill out what the individual you're reviewing is enrolled to provide. And again, there's the yes/no column. So if you're able to provide documentation to prove that you meet these requirements, you'll select yes and attach that documentation. And if you don't have it at this time, you'll select no. And again, if you scroll down to the bottom of each service, there's going to be a checkbox here. If you answered no to any of the above, what is the provider agency's plan of action to address noncompliance? So we're just kind of looking at what are you going to do to get into compliance with all the requirements and maybe what that time frame looks like. I did want to point out some of these fields are requesting all the documentation below, and some are requesting just maybe 1 or 2 things. So I just wanted to point that out to carefully kind of read these. An example is this. So the first one here is you provided documentation. Individual provider has reviewed as it is competent in the following. So we want all of these boxes. You have to be competent in all of the following, and you'll see there's an and here behind each one. So I just want to point that out. And then if we move down to the second requirement here, it says provided documentation, individual provider has one of the following. And you'll see or here at the end. So just kind of pay close attention to that. We're not looking like in this checkbox here, we're just looking for one. We don't need all 3 of these boxes checked, just one. But like up above, all of these will have to be in compliance with, all checked to be in compliance with that requirement. And if we scroll down to the bottom, it's kind of the same.
Melissa, may I ask a question about one of those?
Sure, go ahead.
That upper box you had there with the 4 different requirements, the person-centered plan development, things of that nature for care coordination. What are you necessarily right there? What are you expecting for those to show the competency? Are you looking for a date that they reviewed them? Are you looking for a document that says they reviewed them? Are you just looking for us to say that we know they reviewed them? What are you looking for a provider to show that they did review those and they are competent in those areas? Because those are just website links, from my understanding, the majority of them.
Yep. Yep, and again, that's up to you as an agency. If you want to create a training log for each individual provider and maybe have them sign and date, you know, yes, I attest I reviewed this on such and such a date. That's an idea. We don't want to kind of tell you how to do that. That's something your agency can decide. But whatever you as an agency want to provide to us to let us know that your individual providers have reviewed those trainings, kind of up to you how you want to develop that. We're not requiring specific documentation. I mean, some of them, I haven't looked at all the trainings myself, but if there are some that maybe have a certificate, you could attach that, a certificate of completion. You know, if not, you could just have a training log saying that your provider reviewed all the above trainings and have them sign and attest to it. That's up to you.
And then as far as the applicable 1959 policies and trainings, you know, it's a pretty vague word.
Right.
Again, this, as long as they've signed something that they've reviewed all the applicable 1959 policies and trainings, we can rest assured as
Yeah,
much as possible.
yeah, yes, yep. And what we're looking for kind of there is more, you know, what that individual provider is, the services that they're enrolled to provide. Obviously, we really encourage that provider to read the policy if they're, you know, providing peer support. They should read that policy and be aware of what is in it, you know, and be competent in that.
Melissa, can I jump in real quick?
Go ahead. Yeah.
And just, you know, most of this, or a lot of this, is really what any agency would have in place. Like an agency needs to have, if they have employees, they need to have agency policies. So we certainly don't want to tell you how to write your policies or what forms you're going to develop. We would never do that. So whatever makes sense within your agency. And, you know, like I said, if you were a licensed agency or an accredited agency, you would be expected to have these same things in place. So yeah, that's all I want to say.
I have one question on that as well.
Yeah.
For these, if we were to take care of each of these and provide that documentation, let's say 3 reporting periods from now, can we use, is that a one-time thing that they've reviewed the person-centered plan development implementation in each of these things? Or do we need to re-review and provide different documentation each reporting period? Or are these like a one-time, they've done it, they're good, and we can use that same kind of documentation for the next reporting period? Or is that something annually we need to re-review? I know you haven't gotten to a second period yet, just thinking ahead, I guess.
We haven't gotten that specific yet, but think of your internal agency. Would you be happy with and feel like your providers, your staff are competent if they read the policy once? Maybe some of them will, maybe others won't be. So again, it's flexible. I know in time this is going to evolve. I used to license facilities, and I know we would require, you know, like if it was mental health first aid, we would require that annually, or CPR, whatever, whenever their license expired, that type of thing. So at this time, we haven't decided, yes, this must be annual. And we're going to want feedback. And sometimes it will make sense where, yeah, if you review this policy once and it's changed 5 times during that year, then probably would want them to review it again. So I know it's not a black and white answer, but there are none. So does that help?
And there are some
Yes,
things
thank you.
too, like the mental health first aid is good for, I think, like 2 or 3 years, or like there's different things. So we're gonna kind of have to just address things as they come up. You know,
Yeah.
that's the greatest source of policy, right? Is when something happens or you figure something out, then you address it
Yeah.
per policy. So it's kind of the same way with these processes for us. So bear with us, but please provide feedback.
And we want this to be as easy as possible for you and for us, while at the same time, truly, the overall purpose of this is to ensure that the well-being and quality services to the individuals we serve. So just remember that all the hoops we have to jump through and everything we're doing, in the end, it's in the best interest of our clients.
Did anyone have any other questions before I kind of go to the bottom of the form? Okay. And it's pretty much laid out like the other one. Once we get to the bottom of the form, again, like I said, everything is broken out per service. So you'll only fill out the services that this particular individual provider you're reviewing is enrolled to provide. And again, there's a section for the provider agency to sign and date and add any comments that you would like the department to review. And then again, the department will decide if the affiliated individual provider is in compliance, and we'll sign and date the form as well and give back to you if there's any comments or feedback we have for you as a agency to review. So that's really the two different forms. Does anyone have any questions or any feedback they'd like to provide?
Melissa, I guess I would just like to clarify, and I think you already answered this, but is this something that we will be sending out to the providers? Like, okay, it's time to start thinking about your annual reporting. Here are those 2 forms, reminder, one for your agency and then one for each of the individuals that's providing services. Or are we going to expect the providers to stay on top of these?
Well, I know probably for this year and next year, I'm sure we're going to be sending these forms out. I anticipate the forms will probably change after we get some feedback for next year's annual reporting. So I think, until we have the forms in a pretty solid, not going to change moving forward, we'll probably post them on the website, but we don't have them out there at this time.
Sure. And at that point, then we can post a schedule of the reporting periods as well.
Yep.
So that
Yep.
that's available for everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really all I had. Dawn, if you had anything else you wanted to add, or Monica, or anyone has any questions they'd like to ask?
I don't think so.
This is Heidi at Nexus Path. I did have a quick question.
Sure.
Now I understand that the provider agency review report, we're still supposed to submit that even if we haven't provided services yet. What about the individual provider review report? Do we submit that even if we haven't provided services yet?
Like, you don't have any individual providers enrolled yet. So there would be nothing to report on those. For any agency that didn't have any individual providers enrolled yet by that point.
Oh, by 9:30.
Yeah,
Okay.
by that 9:30. Yep. So then
Thank
it would
you.
just be, yeah. Melissa, it looks like Austin has a question too.
Yeah, go ahead, Austin.
I may have missed this earlier, but we had a bunch of individual providers initially signed up for the 1959 during that time frame of this period here. However, they are now disenrolled from providing a 1959 never did. This isn't asking for all those providers to also be submitted in there, or just our current providers, or is there a list of providers you're going to send us that you'll be asking for in the individual provider list? How will that work?
Oh, that's a good question. So they never provided those services.
Correct. We have, I mean, probably 20 people that never provided 1959 services for us, but we initially assigned them up to be ready for the initial onslaught of 11,000 clients coming through the eye.
Did you say did you unenroll them, Austin, or are they still enrolled?
They are unenrolled now, but I don't believe they were unenrolled prior to the 9/30/2021 deadline. I would have to double check at what point they were disenrolled. But again, they never provide services. They were just enrolled as providers, approved for providers, but never did any billable units for us.
Yeah, truthfully, when that 9/30 date had come around, we weren't yet really aware of how important that unaffiliation and that unenrolling piece was. And so yeah, that's something we might have to think about and discuss.
Yeah, I don't know on that one. Don, what would you think on that? Maybe she had to jump off. We'll take that back, Austin, and we'll get back to you.
Yeah, we can send out an email to this group with the answer on that.
Yeah.
I hope you side on the one with less work for me. So
I know.
let's
You too.
side on the one where they don't need to be submitted if they didn't provide services.
Yeah, I'll definitely be advocating for that option for sure.
So back to the question before Austin's, and I apologize, I didn't catch who asked the question, but for the individual providers that were enrolled but didn't provide services, I know the answer to that person was your individuals weren't enrolled yet. For those of us that did have individuals enrolled but have not started providing 1959 services, is it the same as the agency where we still fill out these reports?
I believe so, yes. We would, if as long as they were enrolled during that reporting period, a report will need to be filled out for them.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I got one more question on that. What if a staff quit in that time or is no longer with us? They did provide services during that time frame, but are no longer affiliated with our agency. Would that be another staff that gets submitted in this report, or are they kind of null and void because they're no longer with our agency and were approved, initially to provide the services?
That's another good one.
I think what we're going to have to do is lay out the different kind of employment issues and kind of those deadlines, and maybe come up with, the answers to each of those types of scenarios, because it seems like there's a lot of variables that we just want to make sure we're all on the same page with. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I know that's something I can't answer. Maybe I can get my supervisor's input and get back to you, or they'll probably would be best to let the whole group know. I'm sure
because we've, just to be clear on what those questions are, we've got if they stopped working there prior to 9/30 but did provide services, or
Yep.
if they were enrolled but never provided services, or if they, is there another, were those the only two? Seems like there would be more. Austin, help me out.
I'm sure there probably are more instances. Those are the two that come to my brain initially thinking about this, but
Okay.
no, just again, I mean, we had 50 providers in here at
Mm.
this one point not providing services, but approved to provide services, and they never did.
Yep.
And of course, people coming and going. If someone was here for us, can vouch that they had those certifications during that time they provided services. However, I would be unable to vouch they still have those certifications up to date, if they're no longer enrolled with their agency and maybe with another agency or on their own providing 1959 services.
Yeah, and really the only question would be whether they had those certifications in place as of 9/30.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're gonna have to address, the potential scenarios as a team and come up with the right answers for those. Yeah, and then provide those scenarios to you all. If we had group enrollment but no individual providers enrolled, yes, I think we know the answer to that, but let's also staff that too, just to make sure. So 3 potential. And if anybody else thinks of anything else, please let us know and we'll add that to our list because we definitely want to make sure that we're all working off of the same information.
Was there anything else that anyone can think of at this point? If not, please feel free to email Dawn or myself or Monica, or give us a call with anything that comes up in the meantime. And we'll staff these questions on and respond to this whole group here with this invite. And I did want to add, this meeting is recorded and I'm going to get it posted on the website. I had a provider say that she had prior commitments and wanted to view the meeting at a later date. So it'll be on the website if anyone wants to listen to it again or see how they sounded or something. So well, if there's nothing else, I can let everyone go. Thank you so much for giving me your time, and hopefully we could clear up a few things. And again, if something comes up, just please reach out to us.
Melissa or Monica, I did put one more question in the chat box that was unrelated here. Do you have any updates on the number of individual providers approved for 1959, as well as the number of individual clients approved for at least care coordination under the I currently?
Yeah, so the number of individuals as of the last time I looked, which was this morning, was 67. And the number of providers is still the provider report that's on our website. There haven't been any updates to that.
Thank you very much, guys, for all the
Yes,
help today.
absolutely.
Thank you, everyone.